What's good, everybody? It's your boy Big Nate. Welcome back to Big Nate's Book Reviews, home of the best book reviews. And today we have a dope ass video in store. Today we are doing a bookshelf tour. But this one's gonna be a little bit different because, as you may have noticed, I got a different background, there's different lighting, and just changes in the air. What happened is my girl got a job here in Denver, and me being the loyal, loving, work from home boyfriend I decided to, of course, tag along with her. Where Bay goes, I follow. And in the process, we have upgraded for our 1-bedroom apartment to now having a 2-bedroom condo. Would you believe it? So we got a whole bedroom. I'm sitting right now in the official Big Nate study. I'm looking forward to going through the whole new collective, Big Nate library. Like I said, give a tour of the study. It's gonna be a dope ass video. But of course, before we get into that, the astute viewer will have noticed that the doobie has been sitting, it's been lurking, it's been waiting to be sparked. All right, and now that we got our mind right, let me see if I can get this transition right. I welcome you officially to the Big Nate bookshelf tour. Let's just do a quick 180. First, we got my lazy ass dog right here. We got some bookshelves, we got some paintings, recliner reading area, got my work desk, another bookshelf. I've been studying for my final, as you can see. Finally hung up my degrees, finally hung up them accolades. Got a painting, my girl, where my Vonnegut fans at? My girl painted this. Didn't I just get such a winner? And I asked myself about the present, how wide it was, how deep it was, how much of it was mine to keep, and just look at that beautiful painting. We got this one at a yard sale. My girl was gifted this by like a family friend or something like that. I don't need to go through all the histories, but I am particularly proud of this painting. It's called The Fallen Angel by I forget who, but it's inspired by Paradise Lost, and this big old thing. I feel like it really sets the tone for the room. This is like, what is it? The Vision of Ezekiel by Raphael. Funny story about this one. I thought this painting was just like sick. Like, look at that, that's beautiful, Vision of God. But I'm kind of embarrassed to admit it, I only recently found out that there's another part of the picture where like there's a little dude essentially at the corner, just putting into scale the tremendous immensity of this vision of God, just making the painting even more epic than it already originally was. We got my guy here, he just been sitting around all day, just be snoring, snoozing, not doing a thing, while daddy sits at the workbench paying the bills. I am presenting at a conference next week, in fact, in Atlanta, and I've been doing as much analyses and presentation stuff as I can cram in until then. And on top of all that, would you believe I got a final, 2 finals due tomorrow, so I've been putting in work. I'm in Calc 2, which I know this kind of looks crazy, but if you're really into the math stuff, you know this ain't shit. But like I said, I got my degrees. We got English, psychology, neuroscience, I don't know if that's the order, and then my master's in cognitive neuroscience. And yeah, I think that about sums it up. Let's do one last little look. Again, this is the general vibe of what I've been living day to day, and I gotta say, and I think our boy here will agree, Huckleberry agrees, that we have been living the life. But without further ado, let's get into actually talking about some of these books. First, I think this is just like my almost all-time shelf. You see, I gotta, why is it not at the top? Why is it not at the bottom? Keep it right where my mind at. Do you understand me? Keep it right where my mind at. That's how good these books are. War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy, Anna Karenina. I mean, these two, you could make an argument for these 2 books, or at least Anna Karenina being one of the books that if you could only take 3 books onto a desert island, what would they be? Tolstoy must be there. And honestly, I kind of feel the same about the Odyssey and the Iliad by Homer. I think I personally like the Odyssey more, but these are both, of course, fire books. And oh my goodness, what would I be without East of Eden by John Steinbeck, Brothers Karamazov by Dostoevsky. I kind of say this is one of my favorite books, but at this point I feel like it's been like 5+ years since I've read it. I really gotta reread it to be able to keep saying that. The one book that's on this shelf that I haven't read is Dante's Inferno. Call that motivation. Remind me I need to get to that soon. Plato's The Republic. That's actually, come to think about it, Martin Luther King Jr. He said this is one of the 3 books he would take to him on a desert island. What do you know about that? Don Quixote, another timeless classic. Paradise Lost, goddamn, another timeless classic. Dude, this is actually a fire. I haven't really gone through them like this. These books right here will change your life. Damn, not to mention Ficciones by Borges, Solomon by Toni Morrison. A Farewell to Arms, that might be contested, but I have kind of a personal sentiment with this book. I've talked about it on another video. Kokoro, that definitely belongs here, another absolute banger. Blood Meridian, another banger. 100 Years of Solitude, banger. Pachinko, banger. And The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde, of course, a banger. So this is, I feel like this is kind of like my top tier shelf. Just below we have, I'm calling this just philosophy in general. We have The Essential Writings by Emerson, someone who I swear every time I read it, he just gets better and better. Nietzsche on Genealogy of Morals and Ecce Homo. We got Schopenhauer, of course, related to Nietzsche. A textbook I read on metaphysics, just kind of like general philosophy, going through the main history and thoughts and ideas. Herodotus, he's the ancient Greek, so I'll throw it in. Hero with a Thousand Faces, Joseph Campbell, you already know I fuck with it. And the Chomsky Reader, we did an essay, The Manufacture of Consent on Stream, and had an excellent discussion. So this kind of, of course, wait, what am I talking about? We got Aristotle, Plato, Mencius, Karl Marx, Carl Jung, Aristotle, some books on existentialism, Thoreau, Parfit, Marcus Aurelius. These are all bangers too. I stand by all of these. The Myth of Sisyphus by Camus. Apparently I have Meditations again, Plutarch's Lives, etc., etc. So these two shelves right here will keep you busy alone. But of course we got all this in the rest of the house to explore. Up next, let's talk about the Penguin shelf. And I mean, this is exactly what it looks like. Literally just a whole random collection of books that are Penguin edition. We got Cicero, we got Jane Austen, George Eliot, William James. Oh, I want to read this book, The Varieties of Religious Experience. People talk about it. It's mysticism, a topic I'm of course highly interested in. And William James is, I learned this in my degree, one of the most important, definitely American psychologists ever to have done it. So I gotta hit that book up at some point. Jack Kerouac, On the Road. We got again Schopenhauer, again Nietzsche, Kierkegaard, Frankenstein, the Count of Monte Cristo. Someone in the Discord's been reading it and they had some banger quotes to offer by it. So I read the abridged version. I didn't know it was abridged, but I really fucked with it back then, and I feel like this would just go even more hard. And we got a lot of bangers, we got we got Borges, Legati, Sojourner Truth, and then Montaigne. I fuck with Montaigne. And in fact, I need to revisit this guy. He just manages to take any kind of topic and give you some interesting insight about it. Let's just take a look at some of these. On fear, that we should not be deemed happy till after our death. The highlighted and star ones are the ones that kind of stood out to me that I've read at least so far. To philosophize is to learn how to die. On the power of imagination. On schoolmasters learning. On educating children. It's just, he has an essay on thumbs, on solitude, on sleep, on names, on war horses, but over the course of this whole book, you end up getting a coherent philosophy and also just tons of great insights about life. I love, and for that reason and more. We have Sophocles, we have the Aeneid by Virgil. I really, really need to get that. That's my guilty confession. I have not read the Aeneid. Borges, the Aleph, and Ovid's Metamorphoses. So this is it's another pretty banger shelf. This is kind of the surreal psychology and mysticism section. For example, we got Freud's The Interpretation of Dreams, we got Jung, Modern Man in Search of Soul, and Memories, Dreams, Reflections, both bangers. This one less so, but you do gotta give Freud some kind of props. Grimm's Fairy Tales, Don Juan, Upanishads, Jung, Freud, Rumi. And then Kandinsky, Concerning Spiritual Art. Pedro Paramo, another surreal one. Now we're getting to Franz Kafka, Ted Chiang. Then we got some actually both I feel like medieval Christian mystics. St. Augustine and Meister Eckhart. We got Heraclitus, Freud, Kafka, the Tao Te Ching, some Power Myth, Calvino, more Joseph Campbell, Bhagavad Gita, etc., etc. So that's kind of what we got going here. And look, now you got the full 4 panel, and again, tell me where there's not bangers. All right, so this shelf I feel like is just kind of general classics, so why don't we just go down the line here. I'm seeing Natsumi Soseki Bochan, and I really got into Soseki after my girl read Kokoro here, and then she put me on, and after I read Kokoro, I had to hit the back-to-back I Am a Cat and then Three Corner World. So Soseki has quickly worked my way. I guess it's just the 3 books, but the way I just read them consecutively and just could not get enough, and I was waiting to try and find a used copy of Bochan. That was really the only thing that slowed me down from hitting a 4 back-to-back, but I ended up asking for that for Christmas. And anyway, I've really enjoyed Soseki, basically is the point there. I'm seeing Goethe, The Sorrows of Young Werther, All the Pretty Horses, of course, a classic by Cormac McCarthy. Another copy of Crime and Punishment, Notes from Underground. I feel like the quality of my book fits very well the quality of the story. Not to say that it's bad, just as bro is tweaker and raw and a little frayed at the edges, we could say. I actually did a book club with one of my cousin was like, yo, me and some homies are doing book club. Let's do Notes from Underground. So I joined. He goes for the first meeting, and then bro completely bails, and I just continued doing the book club with his friends, and ended up being fire. So we got more Dostoevsky with The Idiot, another classic, the Bronte sisters, Jane Eyre and Wuthering Heights. Book I have yet to read by Cormac McCarthy, The Crossing, Jane Austen, Sense and Sensibility, As I Lie Dying. You know, this is a pretty solid book by Faulkner, of course. Joan Didion, who just every time I think of her, I just think she has such beautiful, elegant sentences. And I love this autobiography where basically just like two of the most important people of her life just back to back either die or have like some very serious debilitating illness, and it's just her way of coping with grief, but in that beautiful Joan Didion language. Dubliners, Bleak House, Charles Dickens. We got Flannery O'Connor right here. I've read both of these. I think I probably like her short stories more than her novel, but still both bangers. Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, A Clockwork Orange, Tale of Two Cities, Virginia Woolf, some Hemingway. Ooh, who's that peeking in there? It is James Joyce. We got some Virginia Woolf here. A book that everybody on the BookTube community really be hyping up, John Williams' Stoner. A book I would also really like to get to this upcoming year, I think. Gravity's Rainbow by Thomas Pynchon. Some Hemingway. Joko, We Were the Mulvaneys. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, like I already mentioned, Soseki. Brave New World. My, again, embarrassing confession is I have not read Brave New World yet, and or really anything by Huxley, so that's a major oversight on my part. Crying of Lot 49. I feel like if I start with Pynchon, it might be this one. Let me know if that's a mistake in the comments. But overall, kind of brief tour here. That is this shelf, which is kind of just generally the classics. All right, so this is kind of like the science shelf. So let's see, Nature's Wonders in full color. I got this at Goodwill. It's just like really cool pictures of all different kinds of nature, plants, animal life. It was just a very, and it has little, not essays, but like, you know, caption, writing, whatever. I saw that at Goodwill. I said, yeah, I'll definitely get that. Randa, Gödel, Escher, Bach, that's a book I want to read. The Tao of Physics, that's also a book I really want to read. Mythology combined with, you know, physical, mathematical, scientific properties. Which reminds me too of this book right here, Order Out of Chaos, which is one of the biggest themes in all of mythology. I won't even get into it here. I have plenty of other videos. But that's like, you know, has genuine manifestation in like the nature of chaos theory. That's why I got this book Chaos right here by James Gleick, and conversely Information. But we're not going to get into all that right now. Let's go ahead and go through the rest of the shelf. I see Carl Sagan, Cosmos, fantastic book. Probably what I would read next by him, The Demon Haunted World. I don't know exactly what it has to do. I think it's just the power and nature of science to illuminate, as we see with the fire. Very Promethean symbol, if I may say so as well. Illumination, consciousness, the creator of man. That's what Prometheus was. And science is a way to illuminate in that same way the nature of the universe. So I think that's the idea. But yeah, I would say I'm even behind on reading that. Do you see how many good books there are to read? I'm overdue on so many. And another book I really need to visit, because I read one essay by it in it and it was great. Albert Einstein's Out of My Later Years, which are just essays on a whole bunch of different things, ranging from like science, culture, politics, philosophy, religion, all that good stuff. And then another book, I've read, you know, several essays at this point, and all of them have been super good. Oliver Sacks' Everything in Its Place, who was a neurologist and one of the founding, you know, fathers of, I would say, cognitive neuroscience, the relation between like neurological diseases and things happening in the brain and the way that manifests in personality, in cognition, in perception. He has, you know, all these patient cases that are just fascinating to read about, and here that's basically the same idea in The Man Who Mistook His Wife for His Hat. That's the first book I've actually read by him. And so anyway, I'd love to talk more about this shelf, but we just have to hit some of the highlights. But if you have comments, questions, concerns about this whole general quote-unquote science shelf, let's hear them in the comments. So this shelf here is where we kind of start to lose some of our organization. It's kind of generally like genre, like as you can see, we got the 3-body problem trilogy here. I did videos on all of this. Very, you know, solid, really out there. So each book just kind of levels up till the end. It's like you're in a totally different place and scale than from the first. But each of these books I think is unique and offers something really interesting ideas. I was definitely a fan of this trilogy. I've read some stories, but need to read more by Philip K. Dick. Project Hail Mary. I fully stand by this book for as whatever quote unquote corny as it is. But yeah, I fuck with Project Hail Mary. Then we got Ursula K. Le Guin, who you could kind of call literary fantasy, I feel like. The Left Hand of Darkness. We have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson. Honestly, I really wanted to like this book. I found it just kind of generally boring and slow. There's definitely some creepy moments, but I feel like I, again, kind of prefer Shirley Jackson in her short story form, maybe kind of like with Flannery. We got some more horror here with Algernon Blackwood, another random Joseph Campbell book. Of course, the most genre book of all, the Holy Bible. Then we got Teaching a Stone to Talk, kind of like, I guess, like that, you know, nature genre, but just series of essays, which I thoroughly adore. Leonora Carrington, that kind of surrealism. I bought this book by accident for school because it looked identical to this book, which is the one I was supposed to buy for school. And say what you want, you can clown me if you will, but you cannot tell me that these are not similar ass looking books. Then we got some sci-fi, Annihilation. Haven't read this, but I have a feeling it's actually gonna be a really good kind of like entertaining read. I know they made the movie based off of it, The Haunting of Hill House. I actually have not read this one by Shirley Jackson. I guess you might call this one here Fantasy Master and Margarita by Bulgakov, but you know, some classic Russian lit, maybe magical realism, but I've yet to read this and am long overdue, as I am with so many other books on this shelf. Kim Stanley Robinson, Aurora. So we got some sci-fi. What even is it? I can't read this. Oh yeah, The Yellow Wallpaper. Banger short story, and my girl actually read the rest of these, and she thoroughly enjoyed the other stories by Charlotte Perkins. What is it? Gilman. Then we got H.G. Wells, so sci-fi, although you'll notice funny title here, The Invisible Man. I accidentally bought this book. Wow, I'm bad at buying books apparently. This has happened a few times, I think, in the shelves here. But The Invisible Man, I was trying to buy Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison, but you know, I got this. It's like H.G. Wells, you know, War of the Worlds. He's still a go. So it's like let's see what's going on there. More sci-fi with Hyperion by Dan Simmons, a book that people have been thoroughly enjoying. I've heard it kind of like discussed as almost like a sci-fi pilgrimage. What's that one book? I think I've heard it compared to the Canterbury Tales. Maybe it's like a sci-fi Canterbury Tale. I don't know. Let me know in the comments. Man's Search for Meaning. We've talked about this book at length, of course. Viktor Frankl, who was in the concentration camps of, I think, Auschwitz. Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse, classic spiritual novel. The follow-up to the Teachings of Don Juan, A Separate Reality. Dune, another, you know, classic. I have my little flaws with Dune, but no, I walk away with this is a solid book. Then we have this beautiful Taschen edition of Alchemy and Mysticism, which just has like really great essays, stories, images. I'm kind of doing a bad job of flipping through this, but of you know, just some banger symbology images in Alchemy and Mysticism. And as you can see from the highlights, I've kind of just been idly reading through this, and so far where I'm at, I've been thoroughly enjoying. And then last but not least on the shelf, we have The 10th of December by George Saunders. And I've read a few stories in this collection. You know, some of them I think are really good. Some of them have fallen a little flat for me. And if you've watched this channel, you know I loved the beginning part of Lincoln in the Bardo, but then it just really fell off downhill for me, and I had to stop reading. So I don't know, the jury is still out for me on George Saunders, but without further ado, that concludes this more or less kind of like, we'll call it the genre shelf. And just below we have, now we've lost all order completely, but let's just kind of go and point out some of the highlights. The Unbearable Lightness of Being by Milan Kundera. You know, there's some really great existential philosophy stuff in here, but kind of mid. Characters, mid. Story, mid. I've talked about this book before. A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. You know, while I thoroughly enjoyed this book, very emotionally deep, I love the characters, there's some that has been nagging at me, and I can't quite it's not the torture porn stuff that people like to say, but there is something about this book that just kind of like separates it from being at that A+ range, and I can't quite put what my finger is on it. But A Little Life, of course, still a banger. The Overstory novel, I think it's another one of those like kind of like nature books. Seduced by Story by the New York Review of Books. Those are pretty much certified bangers by the publisher. Ali Smith, someone I've also really been wanting to read. Then just kind of some like, you know, miscellaneous stuff. Honestly, maybe these books should be in the like kind of like the genre shelf here, because these are definitely fantasy. It's been a long time since I read them, but I remember these this whole trilogy just having me like absolutely hooked. Like I could not wait to go home to go read these motherfuckers. We have a meditation book, and then wow, The Duality of Man right here. Like a very long, deep meditation book, and then The Impetus of Big Nate. So I had to keep that one just for the sentiment. Heart of Darkness, Gunter Grass
Duras, Guy de Maupassant, Hemingway, Rilke, Sally Rooney. I'm kind of curious. I mean, I hear so many like back and forth. I kind of want to figure out my own opinion about this. Gertrude Stein, another one of those like in the Hemingway era. Some kind of contemporary books. I'll just kind of gloss over the rest of these, but I do see Clara and the Sun, which was my first, I think it's actually my only exposure to Ishiguro, and honestly I thought the book was kind of mid, interesting ideas, but it felt like one of the earlier drafts. Like if he really developed this, I feel like this could have been such a cool book, but yeah, honestly this one didn't really do it for me. And then Straight Man by Richard Russo. Funny, satirical kind of take on academia and just kind of like generally, I would say it's a funny book. And while we are at the bottom of the bookshelf, why don't we just look over here to this one, which we got some painting books. Francis Bacon, we got Van Gogh, Hieronymus Bosch, Art Through the Ages, Leonardo da Vinci. Da Vinci just means he's from the town of Vinci. It's not part of his name. His name is just Leonardo. Then we have the great alchemical occultist scientist Paracelsus. Some books from, if you're an English major, you probably recognize some of these. Nice copy of Grimm's Fairy Tales. Yes, I accidentally bought this textbook twice for a class. You might recognize it. Book of Quotations. We've got some medieval art kind of stuff. And then I might save this to talk about a later video for a book haul because I just got these. But some really dope books about, as the titles would suggest, planets and the universe. And as you can see from the covers, we got some dope stuff in store. So that in a nutshell is this bottom shelf. And with that, we have practically got this entire set of bookcases except for this top row, which is essentially just African American literature. Mix of classic, mix of contemporary. For instance, we got Narrative of Life of Frederick Douglass, we've got Harriet Beecher Stowe, Booker T. Washington, W.E.B. Du Bois, and then of course some of the classics, MLK Jr., Malcolm X, Toni Morrison, and I know we got James Baldwin right here for some of the modern classics, and then contemporary, we got people like Jesmond Ward, Yag Yazi, and especially Marlon James of the Marlon and Jake Reed Dead People podcast. That's kind of like the African-American black literature shelf that we got going right here. On the top of the bookcases, nothing particularly crazy. I'm seeing Flannery, I'm seeing Hunter S. Thompson, George Saunders, again, the short story writer I referenced earlier, Will Cather, you know, etc., etc. And let's see what we got on top of these bookcases. I'm seeing Samuel Beckett, Crime and Punishment, Anton Chekhov, but some art books, some mythology, but you know, just that's kind of like a miscellaneous. And I think with that, we have covered from head to toe this entire wall of bookcases. But of course, we cannot forget this random pile of books here. That's my girl's graduation cap. Slaughterhouse 1 fans will know, but let's just go through here. It's pretty miscellaneous. I'm seeing Lonesome Dove, Mark Twain, Cormac McCarthy, Ted Chiang, Confucius, Emily Dickinson, you know, etc., etc. And then just kind of, I mean, I like these two textbooks down here. Memory, it's about the neuroscience of memory, and then just like a book on statistics. We got these textbooks here. I read this one practically cover to cover, Cognitive Neuroscience, in a class titled just that. Superorganism, I have not read, by E.O. Wilson, who, well, that's one of the authors, as we can see right here, which I know I saw it somewhere. Yep, The Origins of Creativity by E.O. Wilson, but as the sort of subtitle says, the beauty, elegance, and strangeness of insect societies. Because things like ant colonies and beehives, they really do show a genuine sort of intelligence. They've done studies where it's like they basically have humans versus an ant colony try and, like, you know, figure out and solve this maze, and the ants are able to collectively do it faster than the humans. So, and the more I learn about just like insect intelligence in general, like in this hive colony sort of way, it's increasingly more fascinating. And look who just decided to join us. Huckleberry came to return back to the bookshelf tour because he was so excited to hear about, for instance, this next textbook, Adult Development and Aging, which I took for a psychology of aging class, which honestly was more interesting than I thought it would be. You know, most people don't give much attention to the fact that in adulthood and throughout adulthood into old age, we actually undergo like multiple different sort of phases of psychology. And this ended up being actually a pretty interesting class. So for the second column, let's just kind of pass over them. I see Pilgrim at Tinker Creek by Annie Dillard, Macbeth, Tender as the Night, you know, David Foster Wallace. This book has kind of been calling to me The Creative Act. I've heard good things, and I don't know, I'm just getting a general vibe from this. Brian Greene, Cosmology, and just, you know, a bunch of kind of miscellaneous. For our third column, we have Lectures on Literature by Nabokov. We got essays by Walter Benjamin,
Richard Feynman, essays by David Foster Wallace, book by Steinbeck.
Some more kind of random ones. Oh, House of Leaves by Daniel Lewinsky, cult classic following. And I thoroughly enjoyed that book. Couple other textbooks I read, and just some more miscellanea. I did want to pull out this binder. I would recognize it anywhere. The Foundationals of Behavioral Neuroscience. And I just have a special relationship with this book because it was like a lockdown semester. I was reading this shit every day. That was when I was prescribed Adderall. But I read this full textbook, and it was one of the most like challenging but rewarding classes I've ever taken. So shout out to the Foundations of Behavioral Neuroscience. And with that, we have gone through this full random stack of books next to our bookcase, and I think it is time to just go ahead and get on to the next one. All right, I feel like we can go through this shelf a little bit quicker. It's a bit of a black sheep of the family, if you will. I feel like we both just kind of put our B-list rando books that we don't quite want to get rid of, but nothing crazy special. I mean, I'm seeing kind of a bummy copy of The Picture of Dorian Gray. I like that the Dover editions, by the way, they're cheap, they get the job done, but I just really don't like the way they're physically presented, and then it's like the text be all small, whatever. We got Salman Rushdie, some Milan Kundera, Carson McCullers. Here we got a Cormac McCarthy book. I want to talk about these books later. I kind of picked them up recently. I might do a haul about that or some. Confederacy of Dunces, Catcher in the Rye, Crying in H Mart. I'm seeing Ursula K. Le Guin. I'm seeing another bummy copy of Paradise Lost. It's not the worst, but honestly, also with the Dover, the Signet classics, again, they get the job done. And I actually have this whole dilemma right now because partly why I've been putting off reading Dante's Inferno and the whole trilogy is because apparently the best translation is with the Signet classics, but I really hate the way these kind of like physically feel. I know people don't really like her, but I stand by, it's been a very long time since I've read it, but I stand by Anthem by Ayn Rand. Again, I know she's kind of a hot topic, but I do remember really fucking with that book. James Baldwin, Giovanni's Room, and of course for some light reading we have the Quran right here. So again, some miscellaneous. We got The Wealth of Nations, Pride and Prejudice, Donna Tartt. Moving on, we got this next shelf. I mean, there's some books I want to read on here. This Cold Mountain book's supposed to be pretty good. I read Plainsong by Kent Haruf or whatever it was, and I quite like this book. Same story here with this next shelf. I mean, I'm seeing a copy of Ficciones again by Borges. This one's in Spanish though, because my girl's learning Spanish. She got a long way to go though. I can barely read that shit in English. Bro just has a very high lexile, if you know what I'm saying. I remember this book was mid. I quite liked Mountains Beyond Mountains. R.I.P. to the GOAT, Paul Farmer. But with that, let's go on to the bottom shelf here. I am seeing we got an interview with Francis Bacon. We got the works of Agrippa, another famous kind of like alchemist, occultist. Madame Bovary by Gustave Flaubert. I've talked about this book. I fuck with this one. Book of short stories. You Are Not a Stranger here. Some Hemingway, some Steinbeck. I'm seeing The Human Stain by Philip Roth. And I think with that, we can pretty much wrap up this shelf right here, which is situated so beautifully between the whiteboard and my desk. And without further ado, let's get on to the next shelf.
And then we finna hit it one more time for all the folks who right now are hitting subscribe, dropping a comment, get into my Instagram at Big Nate's Book Reviews, get into the second channel, The Big Nate Review. We token this last one for all y'all.
All right, and just so you guys got a visual, this is one of the living room walls. As you can see, we have literally the exact same copy, translation, everything of the Iliad and the Odyssey, but this one is new here. Virgil's The Aeneid. I actually made a video about this once. I said, I'm gonna read these books this year or unsubscribe for me, and The Aeneid was one of them, and I hate to say it, but I have not read it. Real Big Nate gang will stick around though, but I understand if you gotta do what you gotta do. Up next, we got just a bunch of hella Vonnegut right here. That's kind of my girl. Actually, I've read Jailbird. I've of course read Slaughterhouse 5. I've read Bluebeard. I read some stories by Welcome to the Monkey House. I read Cat's Cradle. I have not read Mother Night. Over here, let's see, Independent People sticks out to me because Raina was really enjoying this book. I think she had her critiques of it, but honestly, the way she was talking about it and the themes and just the way she was yapping, I'm like, okay, I might have to check out Independent People. Ceremony by Leslie Silko, of course. Don DeLillo's White Noise, haven't read that. Well, John Steinbeck, and then let's go to the second shelf. Let's see what we got here. When Breath Becomes Air, I know it's like an airport book, but it's about this guy who basically just like grinds his whole life to finally makes it at a top executive position at the hospital and research and puts in all this work.
and then he gets diagnosed with like terminal cancer, and it's from someone who's like a neurosurgeon, and just I don't know, I really like that book. The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. I've seen this book, The Body Keeps the Score. I don't know, I feel like it's probably like how trauma and stuff like that literally affects the functioning of your body and shit like that. The next book that stands out is this Genghis Khan book right here that Raina read. She was really enjoying it. It was giving me all sorts of like fun facts, and this tweaker literally, like, we were at the coffee shop and I was just putting in work, and she literally like wrote out a whole timeline of the Mongol history or something like that. I don't know, that was crazy. So the book must have been good. Damn. Mountains Beyond Mountains again. Guns, Germs, Steel is like a history of civilization and humanity type thing, and you know, just some other miscellaneous books. And then let's move on to the next shelf. Raina also read Emma by Jane Austen. I recently read Pride and Prejudice, and it sounded like she enjoyed it, and it's super witty, funny, clever, stuff like that. And then, you know, Jane Austen and the characters, and she told me this funny thing about how the dad or something always talking about gruel, or like how he's always amazed that nobody else wants gruel. So that's a new bit around the house. Joyce Carol Oates, Virginia Woolf. These are like the modern retellings of like fantastical Greek. I don't know if Piranesi's Greek, actually. I know like Song of Achilles and Circe are. And this book just seems like it fits with them. Another Copy of Ficciones by Borges, would you believe it? Mikhail Bulgakov, Gabriel Garcia Marquez, you know, that in a nutshell is this shelf right here. And then we have the one just below it. I of course see Infinite Jest. You know, lately what I've been doing, I would say I've done this for the last few years. I read one really long book at some point, like War and Peace. I just did that, and also kind of foolishly I'm doing The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich. But those books take me damn near, you know, 6 months to really read through, probably more to be honest. But we've just been talking about David Foster Wallace, especially on the Big Nate live stream, one of the best live streams, about some of the essays and his works. And so I feel like I just, you know, that's a book I've been expressing interest in, and so maybe next year I might hit Infinite Jest. Up next, we got The Death of Ivan Ilyich and Other Stories by Leo Tolstoy. So Raina read that, said it was really good. Themes of death, existentialism, meaning of life. And I'm on the Tolstoy train fully. Everything this man touches seems to turn to gold. So him taking those themes, and it's like a novella, that's absolutely a must read soon. But do you see how long this list has been getting throughout the bookshelf tour? You see my dilemma on it, and I'm a slow reader on top of it all. But okay, Dr. Zhivago, more stories by Chekhov, and then Marquez, and I know he's over here also Marquez. My cover of 100 Years of Solitude is way better than this one. This one is weak as hell, weak sauce, bro. The Savage Detectives, I see the homie, The Active Mind, has been reading this, and honestly, I've just seen it pop up around in various different places. I know Robert Bolaño also wrote like 2666, whatever that book is. Anyway, I've heard the name come up, and let's see. Actually, I never even read the back of this. In this dazzling novel, the book that established reputations, Quixotes, okay, you're talking my language, the last survivors of an underground literary movement, blah, 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 blah. But you know what? I'm going to just wait and see for myself with the Savage Detectives. Up next, we got Blindness by Jose Saramago. I forget what nationality. I want to say he's like Portuguese. I remember really enjoying the concept of blindness. It's basically where like blindness becomes like an epidemic. Like if you get looked at by someone with a blindness, you yourself come down with the blindness, and like all this, it's very interesting stuff about just society and character. And it's almost like a post-apocalyptic dystopian kind of book in a way. But anyway, I fuck with that book heavily. Lolita, need to read it. Master and Margarita, need to read it. And that is pretty much this shelf in a nutshell. There's also the Douglas Adams Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I read Dirk Gently's Detective Holistic and it was actually pretty funny. It gave me a Vonnegut vibe. If you look closely, you'll be able to see Sophocles' Oedipus Rex. And now with that, I think we've got pretty much this shelf. Last but not least, we have the bottom shelf here. Kind of just like the textbook books. I've talked about this. I had it for an intro to philosophy class. I really enjoyed the excerpts from here. There's also, of course, this companion piece to kind of like Paradise Lost. Gustave Doré has these illustrations of certain scenes. The fallen angel, Lucifer, him getting kicked out of heaven. So all these good illustrations, prints and stuff, as a companion to a book that you know that I love. So I had to pick it up. Gustave Doré's illustrations to Paradise Lost. Then we got some biographies, just some random books. I did like this one. It's like a book of the Pulitzer Prize winning photographs, and I would just kind of leaf through them. I kept it in the toilet, so for essentially when I went to take a shit, I said, get off your phone and look at some of the Pulitzer Prize. Ooh, dang, bro. 9/11 was crazy, bro. Damn. So you see what I'm talking about. I think I saw this at Goodwill and it's like, you know, of course, why would I not get this? So that is Moments. Another book I want to point out is The Possibility of Angels. It's like an anthology just about anything about the topics of angels. Isn't that like interesting? And then look especially who's on it. John Updike, Franz Kafka, Emily Dickinson, Leo Tolstoy, Sylvia Plath, Marquez, Flannery O'Connor. I don't know, bro. I don't know, bro. I don't know, bro. I don't know, bro. And many others. Not to mention, look at this picture. Look at bro at the side. I feel like this is even the cover is like a very interesting piece of art. Up next, we got the Book of Symbols, which is exactly like what it sounds like. Let's see, chair, throne, key, money. It's just a bunch of, you know, cool images, paintings, statues, just all types of art surrounding these different symbols that appear in all kinds of different cultures. So, you know, I had to pick that up. And for the last one I'll do on this shelf, let's do The Passenger by Cormac McCarthy, the last of the two books, or I don't know, I think the first actually of the two books that he wrote just before he passed. And so with that, we have officially completed the left side of the two living room bookshelves. All right, I am coming to you now, many hours later, a completely different man. Let's do a time check actually. It's 12:35 and basically I just got out of like a straight 5-hour marathon of math. It was horrible. I was taking my final exam. Everything started going wrong. The internet's crapping out. I had to do the hotspot. My computer crashed. I got a flight tomorrow morning for the conference. I'm waking up in like, you know, like 4 or something hours. Anyway, I just wanted to come out here, just ponder, like I said, unwind a little bit and just reflect, because you know what, you know, this actually got me thinking at some point. I'm like, why am I doing this? Why am I actually hold on, I can't be doing all this talking, one second. I sincerely asked myself, like literally, why am I doing it? There's no benefit really to me. There's no professional benefit, educational, definitely no financial, anything like that. But you know what, I'm realizing, especially the more I get into math, like I feel like I'm getting past the hard part and it's actually starting to get like, you know, cool. Like I'm not gonna lie, during my lunch break I do homework and there's a part I make my little cup of Americano. I sit down to do homework and it sounds crazy to say, but that's actually like one of my favorite parts of the day, is just sitting down to do some math. And this is something that I've wanted to do for like many years. So part of it too, like, you know, if I stop, I know I'm just gonna be a little disappointed in myself. I feel like there's gonna be a little bit of wasted potential. And again, this is something that's been on my mind for years. I've tried to do the Khan Academy self-study route. It just don't work. Today is a perfect example. I would not push myself ordinarily to even like 1/5 of this limit, 10%. But when there's a deadline associated and there's a grade and eventually like I'll have a degree, I want that to kind of like reflect the ethic and everything. So I think that's enough for now. I'm gonna go pack it up and we're gonna go at long last finish this last bookcase. And I do, if I'm not mistaken, this is a good one. So let's get right to it. So we got The Handmaid's Tale, Margaret Atwood, Toon Steinbeck, yes, that's another copy of East of Eden, shout out Grapes of Wrath. Kind of like the high school books, Kite Runner, Book Thief, you know. My girl I know really like this, Duology, let's see, by Shelley Parker Chan. It's supposed to be like historical, fantasy, characters, power, politics, dynamics. And it's published by Tor, which is the same one that did the 3 Body Problem trilogy. So it's like, okay, and she really enjoyed those, really. Up next, we got The Idiot by Elif Batuman. Another book that's like pretty popular, I feel like, in the BookTube space. She read this and also really quite enjoyed it. I actually bought that book for her and I kind of suspected that I would like it too. So kind of 2 birds, 1 stone. Martyr, I've talked about this. I did a whole book review on it, you know my feelings. And then a banger, The Heart is a Lonely Hunter by Carson McCullers. I really, you know, I need to pull this out for a reread. Shuggie Bain won the Man Booker. There, Tommy Orange. My girl read this too, and I remember, I think she quite liked it as well. Sherman Alexie. I'm seeing Ishiguro. Never Let Me Go, Remains of the Day, The Unconsoled. Would you believe I haven't read any of them? Let me know which of those 3 you think I should get to next. Yes, another copy of Kokoro. Shogun. I've seen this book quite a few times too, No Longer Human. But okay, we got some other books I've talked about on the channel before. And then Babel. Raina enjoyed at least the themes of this book, where it's like, I think the magic system has to do with like language and translation. And like the difference between what, I think this is the idea, what a word is and like the actual thing itself. That difference is like the source of the magic. I don't know. I know it has to do with fantasy, language, translation. Then of course there is The Tale of Genji, the first ever, I believe it is, because everyone corrected me on the Don Quixote video. I'm pretty sure this is like the first ever novel, Japanese literature, and so this is the unabridged Tale of Genji, and that baby is thick. But you know we rocking the Penguin edition, and so that is this shelf right here. Let me know what you guys think while we go to the next one. Easily the most colorful of them, and you know what? I think I know at least partly why, and that's these Murakami kind of I don't know what you call them, like set of designs and publications. They just have a very distinct color palette, I guess. But I do like the vintage covers, for instance, of Kafka on the Shore with like the black, red, cat. Anyway, Raina has read all 4 of these Murakami books. Dang, that's actually crazy. That's a fat stack. I only read Kafka on the Shore, and I got through like a couple hundred, I think, of the Wind Up Bird Chronicles before I DNF'd, and then I haven't read these other 2. The thing with Murakami, which I think Raina agrees with me on, is like he's good. He has very interesting magical realism, surrealist kind of ideas. Like there's always something interesting going on with his stories. And I don't even know how to quite explain it, but I just feel like Murakami isn't exactly like the best writer. And I feel like if you've read this, you'll know what I'm talking about. But at the end of the day, there is still something about his writing that kind of hooks me in a way that I always, am interested to keep reading him. So we got some other books. Shout out The Sympathizer, Viet Thanh Nguyen, and the other 3 of his books, The Committed and Refugees. We actually just watched this documentary called like The Turning Point about the Vietnam War, and it was honestly so good, and Viet Thanh Nguyen spoke about it, and I feel like we even made connections to the text of The Sympathizer. But honestly, shout out to that I'm not even I think documentaries are actually kind of boring, low-key, and this was a page turner, let me tell you. So we get, we got The Bell Jar, we got Pachinko. Oh, Raina read Free Food for Millionaires by Min Jin Lee, but she says Pachinko is like, significantly better. Zadie Smith, Things Fall Apart. And then we got the Twin Towers of books here, and one of them did in fact crash earlier. I had to set it back up. But all right, let's see what we got. Machiavelli's The Prince, Enchiridion, Tom Sawyer, Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain. We got Dune, Walden, some kind of like mysticism books. I'm seeing Hemingway, War and Peace again, and I think that's kind of it for the rest of the shelf. Just some titles you might recognize, some general idea. I see Hemingway, and then yes, of course, Les Miserables by Victor Hugo. And so that's the left tower we got going here. All right, let's get into the second shelf here. We got some, this is a good book about about the act of creative writing. Another copy of Anna Karenina, Mortal Questions by Thomas Nagel, the famous philosopher who did the What Is It Like to Be a Bat essay about consciousness. Heidegger, Foucault, Pascal. And we can't forget Seneca on the shortness of life, Aristotle's Ethics. We got Plato, more Plato, Candide. And then just kind of a whole bunch of random books. I got some Prison Lit, A Place to Stand, Prison Writings, Leonard Peltier. Bro just got, I'm pretty sure bro just got pardoned recently, so that's cause for celebration. That's like a very interesting story. Some more Prison Lit, and just random kind of stuff going on. But without further ado, I think that more or less sums up the 2 living room bookshelves. Man, isn't that just a beauty to look at? But of course, what bookshelf tour would be complete if I didn't talk about the books that I am currently reading right now? So if you haven't noticed, I've been editing this video for so long. I got a brand new haircut, I got some new complexion, it's brand new me. But I just could not live with myself if I didn't talk about some of these books, like I said, that I've been reading right now. So I'm gonna spark the doobie and then let's get right into them. Alright, so let's just go ahead and kick it off with Moby Dick. And let me just say about this book, I thought it started great. I was so excited. I'm like, yes, it is worth the hype. We get to know Ishmael, and he very quickly, in this kind of like whimsical, fun, but also like interestingly written kind of story, ends up befriending one of the natives, Queequeg. And it's a very funny story where he's like this super intimidating looking dude, but then he ends up just being a total softie, and the 2 of them end up having like this really awesome friendship. And then they're about to go to sea, so I'm like, oh my god, this is about to get super sick. We're gonna get some interesting reflections on the sea as almost like a philosophical object, sea life, the relationship with Captain Ishmael and all the rest of the crew. I'm like, this is gonna be dope. And then essentially once they set sail, this book does a complete 180. It feels to me like it's hardly about the characters or the story. It really just becomes like this encyclopedia, this tedious, boring ass chapter after chapter after chapter. If you like this kind of stuff, then great, you will love it. But it's literally just talking about like the different types of anatomy of whales and how whales are depicted in culture. It even just, like I said, gets down to like the physiology and like descriptions of all these different kinds of whales. And it's like, I can do that in some part. Also, not to mention actually like the whaling boat material and shit. Like we use this kind of line when we're collecting whales, and it's made of hemp. In Nantucket, they use a different kind of material, but for our reasons and yada, yada, yada. And it will just be chapter after chapter. And then once one little fun thing starts happening with the story, and it's like, okay, finally we're back back to the actual fucking story with characters and dialogue and things actually happening. My experience with this book so far is that it will give you a chapter, like maybe two, and then it will go right back to some bullshit. And it's a shame because the story itself is actually like, you know, totally hooking me. Like the scenes with Captain Ahab, especially one of like the early ones where it's like this mystical, blood meridian coded, like this stormy night. Ahab gives this whole, really it's like a sermon of mysticism. And he essentially makes everyone give like a life oath, low-key like a blood oath type kind of thing going on to capture Moby Dick, this white whale, who to Captain Ahab is like this. It's almost like this metaphysical representation. Moby Dick has become a symbol in some ways of like the unknown of the universe. I'd have to think a little bit more about that, but it's this unknown and what is driving Captain Ahab almost, again, kind of at like a philosophical level. It's what's driving him absolutely mad. And then we have other interesting things, like there's a character Fedallah who, I won't give any spoilers, but basically this is another like mystical figure who the crew behind closed doors will kind of like speculate. They have their suspicions about this character, and it's very much giving me like the Judge vibes, where it's like might not be all the way human. But there's so many other great characters, like just basically the rest of the crew, like Starbuck and Stubb and Flash. There have been some great interactions. But oh my god, they are like these tiny little breaths of fresh air in this otherwise horribly stanky, boring ass book, bro. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but to be honest, I'm kind of not. Like, I have felt like, I read this, no shit, it put me in like a foul mood this morning. I'm like, I've been reading this book every day, and it has been just this, like I said, the encyclopedic whale knowledge. So if that interests you, and there's like some little kind of like side stories that have happened so far. Someone in my Goodreads said that I'm crossing the desert right now into like the greatest American prose I'm ever gonna read. And I believe it because, you know, Cormac McCarthy drew on this, so many trusted sources. And at the beginning, and again, the actual story itself, if it would get back to the fucking story, bro, because chapter after chapter, sorry, I'm getting traumatized. This is PTSD reaction. Anyway, I will keep you guys posted on Moby Dick, but those are some current thoughts I have about it right now. And next, we can go through this one quicker because I've talked about this extensively. I've been reading this for months at this point. But the Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, I feel like I've read a majority of the book. So a lot of that is notes. I got like 300 pages. I basically have another book to read, but that's the last one. This book has been great to me, honestly. Through this whole 800 pages, I feel like it's been fascinating. It's awesome to learn about the actual history. And it's like the quintessential thing that kind of happened in history, you know, like World War II and the Holocaust. And this is outlining from the beginning the rise and fall of Hitler and the Third Reich, and essentially just Nazism, the Nazi terror throughout Europe. And another thing about this book that I'm noticing, you know, as we go on, is it really also kind of talks about the high level philosophy of history too. Like, you know, if Hitler had done this one thing different, the whole outcome would have been changed. Or right now, Britain is on its last knee. That's the thing. I knew this at some level, but I low-key did not know it. That Germany straight up like conquered France. They put the swastika on the Eiffel Tower. They were just running shit, to be honest. And like I said, Britain was on its last knee. And for some reason, Hitler, this was his big flop. That's what William Shirer says. This was his key mistake, because Britain was at its weakest point, and they had just got a vantage point from North Africa, and Churchill was literally begging the United States to get involved in the war to help them, because otherwise they were cooked. But Hitler failed to fully realize this, and instead turns around and goes after Russia, and fails to see the timeline where basically the German army is going to get stuck in the deadly Russian winter, which is it's like famously taken out multiple different armies, including Napoleon in War and Peace. Anyway, this book has been fire to me. It has been all reliable. These 800 pages. When Moby Dick gets bad and I can't stand it, I just come here for my palate cleanser. So shout out to William Shirer and the Rise and Fall of the Third Reich. Last but not least, kind of just in the interim, you know how I like to kind of keep a thing of short stories or speeches. This is Strength to Love by Martin Luther King Jr. I've only read like 4 or 5 essays out of this one, but I've read Trumpet of Conscience, and MLK just continues to astound me with like the rhetoric and his voice on civil rights and black rights and activism. He just puts it so succinctly, and there's a historical aspect to it now, and very relevant as well is this idea of non-violent but still ultimately like very disruptive types of protest and civil disobedience. And he's doing that also while preaching about love and Christian value. Like, this man is a pastor, swear to God. A lot of these literally, I think, could be classified as sermons, but he connects them to racial and social issues that he is dealing with in his time in the 1960s. So what more could you want from that? So these are the books that I've currently been reading, but without further ado, let's go ahead and close this thing out. And with that, we officially conclude the Big Nate bookshelf tour. Let me know what you guys think about any of the books that have been mentioned. just the overall vibe, art suggestions, anything of that nature, book suggestions, of course, you already know what to do. Let us know in the comments. If you made it this far, you gotta subscribe. And thank you again so much for watching Big Nate's Book Reviews, home of the best book reviews.